Hi, everybody, and welcome to the live stream. It was another unbelievable day at the Murdaugh trial. We got tons of new facts today, and I am going to ask you to help me figure out, is there a brand new hole in the state's case big enough to drive a white pickup truck through? We're going to talk about it when I get to that part, to that particular witness. I am trying to figure it out myself, and I really want your input on that. We had so many new and interesting facts. There was Maggie's wedding ring, huge deal. There were missing clothes. There was a clueless sled, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. There was the death of the blue tarp, at least if you ask me. And then, of course, there's a mysterious white truck that nobody seems to be talking about yet. But we will. And hopefully we're going to figure it out on this live stream. So be sure to go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, because you absolutely can't miss this case or cases like it. Also, I'm going to be plugging the new facts into my timeline that we're going to look at tonight together. You can see it again. Follow me over on Twitter at LawyerLeeW, and you can see it then. We started out with Mark Tinsley. That's the attorney for Mallory Beach's family, and I'll explain a little bit about that. I thought this was going to be the highlight of the day. I was so excited for the cross-examination. It was not. It was really, really not. Here's what Mark Tinsley said. He is the lawyer representing Mallory Beach's family. Now, Mallory Beach was a young 19-year-old who was killed in a boating accident. Paul Murdaugh, one of the two people killed, and the son of the defendant, Alec Murdaugh, was driving, at least allegedly, driving the boat while under the influence. So her family sued not just Paul, but the entire Murdaugh family, sued specifically Alec personally, and Tinsley said he wanted $10 million from Alec Murdaugh personally. Alec said he didn't have the money, and Tinsley went to the court in that case and said, I want a motion, I'm filing a motion to compel. I want to see Alec Murdaugh's financial records. He said after the murders, though, he thought, it's all over. I mean, Alec, nobody's going to award big damages, much less punitive damages against Alec Murdaugh, the poor guy who lost his son. So he said he was ready to dismiss Alec at that point. We had almost finished the entire direct examination yesterday, very little today. And I was waiting for the cross because yesterday the defense went to the judge and said, we want Harpootlian, that's the name of the defense lawyer. We want this witness completely barred. We want this witness not to be allowed to testify at all because this witness paid another witness $1,000 through a GoFundMe. Here's what they said, that a GoFundMe had been set up to compensate, I don't know exactly what you'd call it, Shelley Smith. Shelley Smith was one of the witnesses who testified earlier. She was a caregiver for Alec Murdaugh's mother the night of the murders. Someone claiming to be her daughter set up a GoFundMe saying she had testified, it was hard, and she should be rewarded for that. As last I saw, it already had $25,000. The defense said that the attorney witness, Mark Tinsley, had donated $1,000 toward that, and they wanted him excluded for that. But then in cross-examination, they didn't even ask him about it. And the judge had invited them to. When they moved to keep the witness out, the judge said, wow, that sounds like some interesting cross. And he said twice, well, you could cross-examine on that. They never did. They didn't even bring it up. I had said last night, you may remember, I wondered how they knew that he had donated $1,000. It may have just been a lack of proof. They may not have actually had the evidence to support what they wanted to say, which was that Mark Tinsley had donated $1,000. In my view, it would have been wildly inappropriate for him to have done that. It would be just crazy for an attorney to do that because looks like you're compensating a witness based on what they said and whether you approved of it. It would be even worse for an attorney who has a case pending based on this particular incident to pay a witness based on the boat crash, to pay a witness in sort of a related case. And then it would even be worse than that for the attorney who was about to testify to do it. Maybe it never happened. Maybe that's why. Maybe they had heard a rumor and then it proved to be not true. That may be why they didn't bring it up. But it was a big disappointment because I thought it would be some real fireworks on cross-examination. The redirect just went back to the question of whether or not, and the one fact I think they brought out on cross was that there didn't appear to be any life insurance. There didn't appear to be anything where there was actually life insurance for either Maggie or Paul that Alec was about to collect. But in redirect, they did bring out that Alec Murdaugh was represented by one of his partners, Danny Henderson, who would have been reviewing the documents. And the way it would have been phrased when it went to the bank was that there would have been a subpoena that went to Alec Murdaugh's banks, and it would have said any account he has signatory authority over. And the argument that was being made by the attorney was that would have included the fake forge account. You can watch yesterday to learn a little bit more about that. I want to move on, though, quickly to Blanca Simpson, who was the centerpiece witness for the day. She originally met Alec Murdaugh when she translated for him in some cases. She spoke Spanish. She then became ultimately the caregiver, housekeeper, caregiver for their kids, housekeeper for Maggie, helped her in her home. She helped with cleaning. She would run to the bank, take care of the children, things like that. She worked for the Murdaughs and with the Murdaughs for a very long time and had become close to Maggie. On June 7th, the day of the murders, she talked about Maggie texting her and asking her to stop at the grocery store because Alec wanted some Capri Suns, orange, and asked her to cook that day. She said that they also talked on the phone and that Maggie not only texted this witness and said, Alec wants me to come home, but she said it on the phone too, that it sounded like Maggie didn't really want to come home for the day. She wanted to stay at Edisto, which is the beach house. And they were having some construction work done, renovation, and she wanted to stay and kind of supervise, but that Alec really wanted her to come home. The prosecution is saying Alec was arranging for everybody to be there because Maggie also said that Alec wanted Paul there because they were going to need to clean up where a man named Rowe, we'll talk about him later, had messed up sunflower seeds in a field, and they were going to try to get that fixed before a hunting event they were having that weekend. So the witness was saying, Blanca Simpson was saying, Alec had invited everybody and wanted everybody there. The prosecution says that's because he had plans to murder them, and that's what they're arguing. She went through some of the messages that Maggie had sent her. Like one was, Alec's about to die. I hope he doesn't go down to, said something about, I hope he doesn't go down, meaning to the dad's house, to sleep. He needs to take care of himself too. Blanca on cross explained what that meant was that Alec was very self-sacrificing and was called on more by his parents than the other kids. And they were both concerned that he wasn't sleeping enough. And if he went down and stayed with the parents because the dad was sick and much worse, then he wouldn't be taking care of himself enough. So she sort of explained that away on cross. There was a lot of talk about what Alec Murdaugh was wearing when. And she said when he went to work, he was wearing khaki pants, a seafoam colored short sleeve polo shirt with 3 buttons and a collar, and a blue sports coat, and regular brown leather work shoes. She remembered that for sure because she said to him, your collar's sticking up, and helped him put it down. Now, Alex said they were, the day after the murders, Alec calls her and tells her, she says his voice is shaking. He tells her that they were murdered. She just dropped the phone. She could not believe it. And he told her that he was at Alameda with his mother and his father, actually, by this time was in the hospital. But he said, would you please go on over to Moselle, to the house, and try to straighten up? You know how Maggie liked it, and we're probably going to have a bunch of people over. So go ahead and straighten up, if you would, please. And he told her, don't go to the kennels. The investigators are down there. Just go up to the house. The prosecution painted this as an invitation to Blanca to go in, clean up any problems that might have occurred, any evidence that might be left, and to make sure that she went past SLED by not going around the kennels where they might tell her, hey, stop, but instead going straight to the house. That's how the prosecution, I think, wanted to paint that. When she got to Moselle, there were a few things that were out of order, different. One was there were no pots on the stove. She had made dinner the day before, and she would have expected there to be pots on the stove or at least in the sink, and there weren't any. She ultimately found them in the refrigerator with lids on them. She also said that Maggie's pajamas were lying in the middle of the doorway, I gather on the floor, laid out neatly, going into the laundry room, and it was unusual. Plus, her underwear was with it and also folded neatly. That was doubly weird because why would she leave it there? And also, she didn't wear underwear with her pajamas. If she was wearing pajamas, she didn't. So those things were a little bit different. She also found a pile of clothes, Maggie's, and then she found clothes beside the garden tub. She found a slight puddle of water, a towel, a wet towel, and khaki pants. Now, that could have been Alec Murdaugh's khaki pants. It could have been that he cleaned up at some point following the murders. That's what I think the prosecution would like to show with that fact. Now, here's what happened with it, though. She said that, and I'll keep going through what she said. She said she went into the closet and there was a white shirt. She had stacked up white shirts there, like t-shirts, like what Alec was wearing, in fact, when the investigators arrived. And one of them had fallen off and was on the floor. It was clean. She put it back on the shelf. The implication maybe was that's what happened when Alec got that white shirt before SLED arrived and after he had called 911. Now, she talked about the picture in Paul's Snapchat. You may remember Alec standing beside a tree, and he's got on khaki pants. He's got on a button-down blue shirt in probably the seafoam blue color. And she said the pants are just like the ones he wore to work, could have been the same ones. And she said that shirt could have been on the floor. She didn't really remember one way or another whether there was a shirt there. But what did she do? What she always did, she picked up the clothes and she washed them. But she said, now that, of course, made SLED look pretty sloppy because all of that was there and the housekeeper was allowed to go through, pick this stuff up and clean it. The prosecution went through a series of questions about how she didn't remember ever seeing that shirt that Alec Murdaugh was wearing, the one where he was standing beside the tree. She didn't remember ever seeing that again. She also identified in that picture of him standing beside the tree that he no longer had on his work shoes. He had on these kind of house slippers-ish that he would wear around the house or out on the property. He had those on, and she said she never saw those again. That testimony ended up falling kind of flat because she also said he never came back to the house. The defense got him to say, he left apparently with his stuff and basically never came back to Moselle again. In fact, she moved in with her husband. They became caretakers for the property for pay because Alec didn't want to go back to Moselle. So she said that the shirt he was wearing while he's standing beside the tree in Paul's Snapchat later that evening, that shirt was not the one he wore to work. She also said, much like another witness, Shelley Smith, she said that Alec Murdaugh said to her something about, you remember that shirt I was wearing, that Vinnie Vine shirt? And she thought, no, I think you were wearing a polo shirt. So she felt confused and she wasn't sure if he was trying to get her to say that he had been wearing that when he went to work. But she felt he had not been wearing that. She felt really sure he had been wearing a polo shirt when he went to work. Now, on September 4th, he asked her to send copies of insurance cards. I suspect this is related to the fact that he is about to, well, who knows for sure. There was no testimony about that. The question was limited to, would you send me copies of insurance cards? And she did. He later, of course, was shot on the side of the road. And that was supposed to be, according to him, a suicide attempt. And then also he went from there to a rehab clinic. So it must have had something to do with that. The prosecution has yet to sort of tie that together for us. And huge fact, she personally or arranged for cleaning or cleaned it herself, Maggie's Mercedes. It had been compounded by the sheriff's office. When it came back, Randy Murdaugh asked her to clean it. She did, and she found, huge fact, Maggie's wedding band under the seat of the car. Absolutely enormous fact, because we have heard over and over that there were no problems between Maggie and Paul, Maggie and Alec. There were no problems. They got along well. They had a great marriage. Why would he kill her? So now the question is not why would he kill her, but why was her wedding band underneath the seat? Had she taken it off? Were they having marital troubles? What was the reason for that? So that was huge, big testimony. Now, we will also be looking, as I assume they're going to bring the coroner in to talk about what her effects were. And what we'll be looking for is, did Maggie have on a ring at the time she was collected? And if not, we want to know why not. That was probably the single biggest fact, except for the one I'm going to ask you to help me figure out. Other than that, it was probably the single biggest fact. She also testified, and there was a great deal of struggle over this. She testified about the fact that she had had a conversation with Maggie a few months earlier. They were talking over coffee, and Maggie closed the door, even though Alec was sleeping clear on the other side of the house. And there were objections at this point. There was a proffer there. And finally, the judge said, look, and the defense had a good argument. They said, look, it doesn't matter what her state of mind was. It's what Alec's state of mind was. So the fact that she was anxious and worried about something isn't really relevant to this murder trial. And the state said, maybe not, but it's relevant to their marriage. And you brought that up and said they had a great relationship. So I'm letting it in. And so what the witness testified to, what Blanca said, is that Maggie said she was really worried about the boat crash lawsuit, that they wanted $30 million from the family, that they didn't have that kind of money, that she would give them everything she had just to make this case go away. And she was very worried about this case. So now the defense asked numerous questions, of course, related to the relationship between Maggie and Paul, which they have confirmed was positive. With witness after witness, they've said they had a really good relationship. So what she said, and she identified, and this was sort of interesting, she identified that the same voices that everybody else did. They played that last video where Paul is dealing with the dogs, and she recognized Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, Alec's voice. But interestingly, when she initially heard it, she had said she thought she heard a fourth voice. I did too. I was interested that anyone else had thought that. I just figured I didn't know what they sounded like. But she said, having listened to it more, she didn't think she heard a fourth voice. She just heard the three. So on cross-examination, Dick Karputlian got her to say that Alec always referred to her as his friend, not a housekeeper, and that he was crazy about Maggie, that she was, quote, his all, that he adored her, treated her beautifully. She never saw them having arguments, other than they did have an argument when Maggie, or at least a minor disagreement, she called it, when Maggie wanted a certain white and Alec just didn't seem to care. An argument I think has been repeated in many households the world over. Is this really a different shade of white, or is it just white? So he also got into the fact that, okay, yeah, maybe the pots were in the refrigerator with the lid put on, but do you know how many people were there that night? And she didn't know, but we do, because we've heard people testify, or there were tons of people there. So I'm sure someone cleaned up. That seems like something some, kind soul would do. They would put all the stuff away just to handle it for Alec. She also talked about the fact that he asked her about cleaning up, because remember, she washed the clothes. She admitted she had cleaned the shower out. She did all of this, and she said it was after SLED agents had come through. So SLED agents came through the house. She said they looked under the beds and somehow missed the khaki pants sitting right there, and the wet towel and the puddle of water sitting right there in the bathroom, which was mystifying, but gave more evidence or ammunition for the defense about the sloppy investigation by SLED. She could not remember if there was a shirt there with the khakis. Would have been interesting to know. There was implication that Alec took showers all day long, all the time, but this witness couldn't confirm that. We may get another witness who will come on and say something to that effect. I don't know. Now, she also, and while the witness admittedly, repeated that she had not seen those clothes again, she also admitted Alec could have taken them with him, since he didn't come back to Moselle after that point. When his cross-examination really got kind of messed up, there was a stage at which he wanted to ask the witness about that time when she felt pressured, when she felt like Alec was pressuring her to say that the clothes he was wearing the day of the murders were ones, he was trying to get her to say what shirt he was wearing. Dick Harpootlian, I think it was Harpootlian, got up and said, well, did he tell you he had just been interviewed by SLED and shown the Snapchat and was attempting to figure out what he was wearing? He didn't actually get to ask that because of an objection. And ultimately, that there was hearsay on that, in a hearsay objection that was sustained. So the witness was not allowed to answer that. And the jury didn't really hear all of that question, but that's where he was headed with that. He then added some facts around it. They're probably going to bring Randy Murdaugh to talk about why it would be that Alec would have asked that question. The rain jacket, the death of the rain jacket, that was one of the most important things of the day, I thought. The rain jacket, you'll remember the blue rain jacket, actually, it was a blue tarp. And Shelley Smith said that at some point, Alec Murdaugh brought in, not the night of the murders, after the murders, he brought in a balled up blue tarp. The prosecution wanted to say that the gun was underneath that. It had gunshot residue on it, and that he was carrying the gun and doing something to hide the gun. They found the balled up, they found a tarp. They didn't test that. They also found a blue rain jacket, and they did test that. They found gunshot residue on it. Well, the rain jacket, they got her to say on cross, she had never seen that rain jacket that they tested before, which makes it really unlikely because the prosecution had gone through and proven that she knew all about their clothes. She knew all about the family. And if she had never seen that rain jacket, it probably didn't belong to Alec Murdaugh or his immediate family. She also, and I remembered that there had been a question, what size is that jacket? And I believe the witness had said large, but Alec wore a 2XL, not just a large. She said Blanca said he might have had one or two items that were just large, but for the most part, they were 2XL. So again, it didn't seem like it would fit. So I thought the rain jacket was seriously damaged goods in terms of the prosecution's case by now. Now, at this point, well, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till I get to the testimony that'll. She also said, I want you to mark this though, and remember this. This is critically important, okay? Because this is where we're going to talk about it in just a minute. She said that she left the house at about 3:30 on the day of the murders, and there was a white truck at the kennels, so she left the front door unlocked. She didn't see Alex's vehicle. And so I want you to remember that fact. White truck at the kennels, 3:30 in the afternoon. She talked about, they did get her to say that Maggie had said that, felt that the family was not being treated well by the people who were their neighbors and friends in Hampton after the boat crash, that really changed the way people treated them. That Maggie indicated she was concerned about Paul because Paul had received threats. So she confirmed that. That's this at least the third witness, I think, who has said that. Then on redirect, she made some comment about Alec purchasing new clothes after the murders, and I think the prosecution wanted to seize on that. The defense countered that by recross, saying, well, he lost a bunch of weight after the murders, didn't he? And maybe he needed, the implication being maybe he needed new clothes for that reason. The next witness, oh, by the way, while I'm at it, would you mind liking the video? And please subscribe, because we're covering this trial and other unbelievably fascinating trials, and you definitely don't want to miss a minute. So Belinda Rass testified next. She has cared for the past 4 years, Alec Murdaugh's mother, Miss Libby. She said that Paul came to see Miss Libby all the time, that Alec didn't come that often on her shift. Now, she worked the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift, so perhaps he just didn't come then. She did mention that just the night before, Maggie and Alec had come late after a ball game and brought some donuts, led to a light moment. Somebody said, the prosecution said, oh, did Mr. Randolph like donuts? She said, well, they were Krispy Kreme. Everybody laughed. So she said it was unusual, but not strange for Alec Murdaugh to show up late. The prosecution was trying to say it was very strange. And now we get to the mysterious white truck that I'm going to stop and look through the comments, because I want to hear what you have to say to this. As soon as I finish talking about it, I really want to know what you have to say about this. Now, Supervisory Special Agent Matthew Wild said that he supervises a team that analyzes cell phone location data. And they look for that data for 5 people: Alec Murdaugh, Paul Murdaugh, Maggie, and Marty Cook and C.B. Rowe. Now, who are Marty Cook and C.B. Rowe? Marty Cook was the father of Connor Cook. Connor Cook was one of the allegations was that Alec Murdaugh was trying to get everybody to say that instead of his son, Paul Murdaugh, driving the boat that crashed where Mallory Beach was killed, that Marty Cook's son, Connor, was the one driving. But what the analysis showed of Marty Cook's phone was Marty Cook was not in the area at the time of the murder. So he was eliminated as a suspect because of that, I suppose. Also, C.B. Rowe. Now, C.B. Rowe was the groundskeeper who, horror of horrors, had messed up something to do with the sunflower seeds. And that was what Paul was supposed to work on the night of the murders and the next day as well. C.B. Rowe's phone also was found to not be in the area at the time of the murder, so he was eliminated. But now, let's go to our timeline. And here is, let me share that with you just a second. We'll add it to the stream. Okay. Now, remember what Blanca said. Blanca said that at 3:30, she left and she saw a white truck at the kennels. So she left the front door unlocked. This witness, Wild, said that the data showed Paul arrived at Moselle, the cell phone data, at 7:30. And before that, his phone was at his uncle John Marvin's house where Paul was working that day. So he arrived at 7:30. Now, specifically, the Blanca said she didn't see Alec's truck. And we also know that at 7:50, Maggie was in Walterboro, not at Moselle, in other words. And what they said, Wild said, was they couldn't track her phone after 7:50 because there were no outgoing calls. So and track this with me if you would, but okay, the housekeeper sees a white truck at 3:30. If Paul isn't there, Maggie isn't there, and Alec isn't there, whose white truck? Whose white truck was it? And let me know what your thoughts are. Does that seem like a problem with the case? Does that seem like maybe they're missing an explanation of who that white truck is? Or maybe there was a problem with when Paul arrived at Moselle. Maybe he had been back earlier in the day, left for John Marvin's, and maybe they just didn't cover that. But it seems like that's maybe a problem for the prosecution's case right now, is the question of this white truck and whose it was and what they were doing at the kennels. The cross-examination talked about two witnesses who are really important. And one of them was Eddie Smith. Well, witnesses, potential suspects, we'll put it that way. One of them was Eddie Smith and one of them was Spencer Roberts. Bizarrely, on cross-examination, they admitted that they analyzed records for Eddie Smith, but didn't bring them to trial, which is just bizarre. Eddie Smith is Cousin Eddie. We've talked about Cousin Eddie on this. Now, Cousin Eddie was the person paid by Alec $500,000 approximately over the past years. There was speculation that Eddie was supplying Alec with the drugs that he said he was taking. Eddie was apparently downstream or upstream, whichever way you call it, from Spencer Roberts. And they have both been indicted for drug trafficking and money laundering. They are alleged to be in a scheme with Alec Murdaugh related to this drug trafficking. So this $500,000 went to Eddie Smith, who also, coincidentally, is the person Alec hired to shoot him in the head while he was changing a tire on the side of the road. And Eddie Smith says, Alec says he missed, that Alec intended to commit suicide. The reason being that Alec wanted to be able to collect, or let his son collect, $10 million in life insurance. That he thought that's what he had left to give Buster, and he wanted to die and Buster would get the $10 million. Buster is his remaining living son. So at that point, it seemed to me just bizarre that they wouldn't have brought the records for Eddie Smith's phone. If Eddie Smith's phone was eliminated, wasn't in the area, that seems like something we would really want to know. I would also be very interested to know whether or not Eddie Smith, Cousin Eddie, had a voice that sounded like Alec Murdaugh's. Those just seem to be things that the prosecution wants to fill in for us so that there aren't holes in the case, so that we have good information about this. Then the final witness of the day was Nathan Tuten. He's currently a Walterboro police officer. He's a lifelong friend of Paul's. He was brought in, I guess, to say that Bubba, the dog, had killed chickens before, that wasn't anything new or different. He, in fact, had done that. The reason that matters, that final video where Alec's voice is in the background, despite the fact that Alec said he was not at the kennels, that final video, Maggie and Alec, or whoever Alec's voice is, are talking about Bubba the dog and about Bubba the dog having gotten a chicken in his mouth and killed a chicken. So it's all making it sound like something that would actually be possible, that could have happened. The other point I think this witness was brought in to make is that he cashed checks for Alec many times, making it sound like Alec dealt in cash a lot. Now, we know he gave $500,000 to Eddie Smith. Imagine if that's not even including the cash, if there was that much more that went on with cash. But he mentioned that there were people in his office sometimes when he would want cash. And they were people like Greg Alexander, the Yemassee police chief, like Corey Fleming and Chris Wilson. There was no explanation for what that would mean. I don't know if that means they had something to do with it, but he talked about this cash and how big a deal that was. And then he also, in sort of the small world, was working as a runner for Alec's firm, which is why he was cashing the checks for Alec. He would take the check down, cash it, bring the cash back for Alec. He said that Jeannie Seckinger at the firm asked him to look through financial files after the murders to be looking for improprieties. We didn't get a lot more of that. Now, Cross was pretty good on this witness, that he admitted that a lot of people did turn their backs on Paul, on the Murdaughs after the boat wreck. He said that Paul did keep guns in his truck. That's especially important because we know from another witness that Paul had left his truck in a shop just that week before. He also said that after the blackout went missing from Paul's unlocked truck at a party, that Paul didn't even realize it was missing for several days. Again, the implication being if that's another gun had been stolen from Paul's truck the week before, he might not have missed it yet. He said that Paul did leave his guns around. He did take them into the shed and leave them there. He was careless with his guns. And he also confirmed that Paul received threats after the boating accident. He thought they were mostly on social media and in text, which is different from what Alec thought. Alec thought they were mostly in person. But he said that Paul didn't really go into detail with him. He just knew that it had happened. And he said he also wasn't aware that Maggie had received threats, which we weren't either. I was surprised by that. That was on redirect. He mentioned that Paul kept his phone in his back pocket usually. I couldn't remember. Maybe one of you will put it in there. I didn't remember when Alex said he turned him over or tried to. Was his phone in his front pocket or his back? I can't remember, but it looked like it was probably a pretty important point. Now I'm going to go back through and see where there was a large Ford pickup truck. I'm curious what y'all thought about the truck, because I was really curious what that truck was down by there. Okay, so I don't think anybody knew. Other people were curious too. So I am very, the white truck was at the mom's house at 6:30 a.m. the next day too. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Okay. Well, you asked for it and you will get it. People, I asked yesterday, would you like sort of a Q&A where I can go through some of the questions that come through during the live stream and say to you, go through some of the answers? And I am going to do that. We had a lot of requests for that. So I'm going to be doing that tomorrow, probably at 7 again. So I will see you tomorrow but wait, I have 2 questions specifically to answer. I want to mention, Nico Dimitro said, did the defense mention the door being left open by Blanca? I didn't hear it. I don't think they did. I don't think they mentioned that. And it seemed like an important point. She specifically left the door unlocked. Now, Maggie and Paul were killed down at the kennels where the white truck was. So I don't know, maybe the fact that someone was in the house didn't seem that important to them, but it did seem important to me that she left it unlocked, and why. And also, thank you. Grisha Serta is saying thanks for the recap, and she appreciates it all coming together. Great. I'm glad that you are liking it. Well, so be sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to do that. And I am going to see you back at 7 o'clock. It might be 7:30, but I'm aiming for 7 tomorrow night. See you then.